The UEE would like to remind everyone that you are responsible for the cargo you carry, even if your cargo is carrying its own cargo. Subjects caught transporting illegal goods within a ship which is within their own ship will be prosecuted. Shipception is not a legal defense. Please fly safely. Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to another exciting episode of Tales of Citizens right here on the Sound Strategy Network, brought to you by TeamLegacy.net. I am Bridger, I'll be your host for today, and we got a great show, ladies and gentlemen. Today is the big one. Today is the topic to end all topics. In fact, it's the topic that dominated the RSI boards for more than 3 months, as I recall. This is the topic about PvP versus PvE and the infamous slider. And how the hell are these instances going to work? We're going to talk all about that today, but let me introduce my co-hosts for today. On the right, we have our good friend, Calathulu. Welcome, sir.
Hello there. It's good to be here.
Indeed. And joining again, the second time on the show here, Gray. Welcome, sir.
How's it going?
Not bad. So we are here today to talk about a lot of great stuff. But before we get there, I'd like to remind you guys that we do record the show live every other Sunday, I should say, at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you are watching on the Twitch stream right now, know that is the low-quality stream at the moment. We had some bandwidth issues, which are not usual. So I've got the YouTube as the high-quality stream, because that's going to be the final product that goes up on YouTube as the final version, and the Twitch stream is on the lower quality stream. I do have the ability to see comments on both Twitch and YouTube for you guys watching, so if you'd like to add something, go ahead and feel free to do so. Let us move on. There is a new website! Huzzah! It's talesofcitizens.com. I put it together between the last time we spoke together, as it were. You can take a quick look at it right here. We've got, the little thing that jumps up. Isn't that impressive? Oh, man. Just like that. That's Ajax. You put enough Ajax on anything and it looks good. I'd say that just to piss off all the web developers in the room.
Well,
so we've got the slider here, which is going to have the most recent episodes. It also tells you when the next event is. So that's kind of nice. We've got a very small page that tells us about what the show is all about. And we've also got links to the show notes, links to this live stream, links to the video and audio archives, as well as links to the Alpha Boot Camp, which brings me to Alpha Boot Camp. If you guys are not aware, we're doing a new project with Tales of Citizens here. What we're trying to do is essentially create how to explain this? We're trying to talk on the show about all of the deep questions, all of the things, delve deep into the discussion about various subjects. But in order to do that, we have to either, A, assume the audience knows the base information that we're talking about, and thus will alienate all the new players, or B, spend 15 minutes going over all the information and thus alienate all the people who already know everything. So what we're doing is we're breaking up the knowledge dump portion of the podcast, and we're putting that into its own thing. So this is episode number 2. So episode number 2 is going to be accompanied by the Star Citizen Alpha Bootcamp episode number 2. I just haven't uploaded it yet, but it's going to go up tonight, and that will be available in both audio and video forms. And it's just me talking for like 10 minutes about the sort of core of information that you need to know before you dive into the discussion here tonight. So that will be up again, hopefully a week before each podcast. I've slowly caught up. So we call that the Alpha Boot Camp, or the Star Citizen ABCs. Yeah, okay. I'm not that funny. So that's what's new with me. I hope you guys enjoy that. There's also the top 5 ways or reasons to be interested, top 5 reasons to be interested in Star Citizen that I posted on the YouTube channel. It's getting a lot of good traction. If you are trying to convince somebody to buy this game, that's a good video to show them. It's on the Sound Strategy Network website. And wow, okay, I'm done. Calathulu, talk to me about Star Citizen, because I've been first doing nothing here.
With your top top 5 reasons to be interested. That has just taken off. So good work with that. I'm not sure if you paid to get the Chinese clickers going through there and saying they're viewing, but well done. All right, so let's see. This week we have the organizations. They brought out that big organization update, all about organizations. And, yeah, and that was actually an interesting read, going through all the various types. Talk about how there's now the no actual type. It's just the organization, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, a lot of just friends and family playing together, or just these bigger groups that aren't really driven for piracy or warfare.
Well, they do still keep the types, but they've mentioned that those are role-playing only.
Well, yeah.
It just sets some default names to sort of theme your enterprise.
Yeah, and then just not having to excuse me, to pick one. I think that's a good choice on their part. And then they've got this whole so initially you can only join one organization, but then they have this concept that you'll have multiple organizations, PC and NPC, that you'll be able to join as well, which is pretty cool. So I can be in TL, but I'm also a member of the Bounty Hunters Guild. Plus I'm in the unrepentant Christian fleet, or whatever it is.
I mean, I'll be happy to be playing around in the convoy.
Yes,
convoy. To have some extra trader backup.
Yeah, unrepentant Christian fleet being a misnomer. There's no fleet. Just kidding. All right, so no. So it's kind of cool because that way you can actually be a member of this group and that group and the other group. They did mention a caveat to that, which is that they will allow groups to track membership and membership in other groups. So if I am in this group, the Yar Pirates group, and I'm also in the Bounty Hunters Guild dedicated to hunting down pirates and eradicating them, they may have an issue with that, and they can certainly find out about it. I'm kind of on the fence about whether that's a good idea or not. My hope is that's per character only, so instead of per account. So if I have a character in the Pirates and I have a character in the Bounty Hunters group, if I want to play one pirate character, more power to me. If I play one bounty hunter, more power to me. Don't make me get chased around by the various people I'm playing with, because the 30 minutes I spend here is different in some kind of moral ethical structure than the 30 minutes that they wanted to spend with me somewhere else.
Yeah, I know a lot of people. There was actually a thread that was several dozen pages long where somebody said, I'm glad it's only limited to one. And then a few days later they clarified, yeah, it's only limited to one because that's a technical limitation, but we're going to remove that limitation as soon as we can. And I imagine this guy who wrote this giant post about, thank you, CIG, for seeing the light, and then going, oh, man.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that was interesting was you can have the same name as somebody else. I mean, I can make a Team Legacy, Ian can make a Team Legacy, Bridger can make a Team Legacy, and nothing will really prevent it. Bob can make a Team Legacy, Joe, but each ID is unique. I like that they did it because, let's face it, a lot of us aren't very creative when it comes to names. So everyone's going to have the Candy Stripers Merchant Service or something like that. But I feel that there's a system that's just rife for abuse there. And that could get us in trouble as well.
Imagine if Goon Swarm ordered all of their members to create their own guild called Goon Swarm.
It's very meta. It's the swarm of Goon Swarms.
Yes, it's definitely meta. That would be a bit scary. What's their name in Star Citizen? They got a special name, and now I can't remember what it was.
Goonrathi.
Goonrathi,
okay,
that's it, yeah.
Fair
and then
enough.
You've got Red Faction and
it's the Reddit one.
And the Test Guild. There's a couple of different Reddit ones. All right, so what's going on with you, Gray? Have anything good coming recently with you?
I found an excuse to continually change the guns and lasers back and forth on my freelancer. It would seem that the persistence in patch 9 seems to be working pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Nice to see them chugging along with the hangar, and I'm definitely looking forward to whatever they're doing at the end of the month, in addition to the dogfighting module.
Well, didn't that get delayed a little bit?
Probably a little bit, but
we have not yet had an official word, but the fact that we haven't had official word says something about it.
Yeah. Other than that, Bridger and I have been diving into some Hawken. The community seems a little bit small, which is, mixed bag.
Disappointing.
But the gameplay is very good. And I have to admit, even with some of the bugs that we've run into with mechs running into walls that don't exist and that kind of thing there, it's challenging and it's fun. And there's definitely a difference between the ultra-mobile mechs and the big heavy things that just sort of sit there and hopefully don't die. So.
Yeah, I've been so far a big fan of Hawken. It's a mech game that feels more like an FPS, but still has some limitations. You don't feel like you can just spin around 180 degrees or just do an instant 90 and headshot people. There are still the limitations that mechs bring. It's just not quite as much as other mech games. And it
it's
seems
legitimately free to play.
Yes,
so,
not pay to win.
You can unlock 7 mechs in the first 7 levels, so in a day or two you've got a whole lot of different gameplay options, which is nice.
Yeah, it's a lot of
pay
fun.
To win, or not a pay to win, excuse me, a free-to-play game. You have the ability to do a whole lot more than you generally expect. Although they did nerf the income that you get from in-game stuff now, so the grind's a little bit longer to unlock everything past those first 7 mechs.
It's still way faster than things like War Thunder, though. I mean, War Thunder and Star Conflict, the grind on those is unbelievable. And I felt like in Hawken, and also the thing in those is the tier 1 stuff that you start by playing with becomes completely obsolete. And then the tier 2 stuff becomes obsolete. And then the tier 3. So you unlock all these things and then you stop using the previous ones. In Hawken, this thing that
there's no
obsolescence. The thing I was using when I first started, the CRT recruit, the noob tube of Hawken, is still valuable and useful to me in certain situations. It's a skirmisher, and I use it as a skirmisher. Anyway, enough about Hawken. This is a Star Citizen podcast. Let's talk Star Citizen. We're going deep into the data analysis here to talk about instancing and multiplayer in Star Citizen. And most of the information about what we're talking about today comes from an article that was written over a year ago at this point by Chris Roberts describing how he wishes the game to essentially work and how he's going to make it work. And it really opened my eyes because for the longest time I was trying to figure out how are you going to make an MMO on this budget? It doesn't make sense. Now that they have 34 million, I'm less inclined to be confused, but still he's come up with a really interesting way to do it, and that involves using all these instances and trying to make sure that people are in the same instance, but there's all kinds of issues that could potentially crop up. Again, if you want the background, go watch Alpha Boot Camp number 2. We're diving right in here. There's one universe. Your experience is passed back and forth between the battle instances and the travel instances, or the battle instances and the galaxy server. So let's jump right in here. PvP versus PvE. Gray, there seems to be a lot of hostility between the people who love open world, always on PvP, and the people who would prefer a more controlled environment. See, I can be politically correct. So,
I mean,
where do you
always going to
stand
be the
on
main
this?
situation with these games. Whether it was WoW or anything massive multiplayer that's been on the market, there's always a question about what's PvP, what's griefing, and where is the line drawn between PvP players enjoying their gameplay and PvE players getting to actually play the game without being, flattened. There's always going to be some anger about that, and I suspect that the moderators for CIG are going to have their hands full with reports for the first few weeks of people flying straight out of their home planet and being ambushed by 30 goon Rothies or whoever else is sitting out there just outside of the safe systems.
Yeah, although they have said that they're putting in systems specifically to prevent that. I mean, they've mentioned that you're much less likely to be put in an instance with people that are much more experienced than you are. Usually, if there are multiple instances, you're going to be put in one so that, in fact, much of the time, those, Goonrathi noob killers aren't actually going to be able to see the brand new noobs. They're going to only be able to see the more experienced players who happen to be in the area with them. But that could also lead to its own problems.
That's the beauty of CIG's system, is what they're trying to do is say, okay, PvP players, there will be a lot of you, and you will want to kill each other. Generally, it's just going to happen. So they're giving everybody a platform to do that. And the further you go out from the safe systems, the more and more likely you are to be thrown into these guys' instances, regardless of how far your PvE slider is set. Um, that said, dealing with the PvE players on the internal systems, the safe systems, will be a lot more of the NPC combat and that kind of thing. I don't know if you wanted to talk to the idea of being able to identify as players versus NPCs. There seems to be a lot of debate right now about how radar signatures were going to work, because it's not going to be just positive or negative identification. It's going to be a whole series of, can you tell if this is a person, or can you tell this is an NPC, or is it a person, or is it just space garbage floating around, or a false positive? What are you dealing with?
Well, and then the concept of the active tracking versus kind of passive scanning, like the mini game thing they were talking about there was one of the dev interviews. I mean, it's potential for a game unto itself.
Yeah.
All of that's going to play into the idea of PvP content.
The other thing that comes to mind is the concept of, if you can't tell whether somebody's NPC or PC via the mechanics in the game, like there's not just blue or green NPC versus PC, icons, is there going to be a way that you can tell via behavior? It seems almost certain that that's the case. If NPC pirates come up and every single time, they say some variation of surrender or die, every single time they do surrender or die, there's like 6 different things that they say. You're like, oh, yeah, that's an NPC pirate.
Right up until real pirates start copy-pasting it.
Ooh.
Or
now
until,
you're bringing it to the head.
If it's audio, you capture the feed, can it, feed it back in, and off it goes. I mean, you could really fake somebody out.
That's true.
Yeah.
Now that you mention it, I didn't think that players would ever want to sound like NPCs, but wow, okay, that just brings a whole brand new thing to it.
Well, especially if you're going to try and pull like a Q-ship concept. If you're a Horatio Hornblower fan, you might remember some of the stories there where the merchantmen would have these hidden gun ports and hidden cannons, and they're crewed by British Navy, and so they go out there and they look like a relatively innocent merchant ship. So when the pirate does attack, he gets just beaten to death, and you could potentially do that with some serious stealth technology and a real merchantman who is looking like a rather helpless NPC.
Especially if you fill that merchantman, the cargo hold, with hornets. I don't know if that's actually possible, but if we could get like the Banu merchantman, if the cargo hold could actually act as a hangar, that would be great.
Again, if there's repeatable escort quests or transport quests, this particular corporation tends to send exactly 2 Avengers with 1, MISC Sea Hull cargo ship every time they want to ship goods. It's going to be as simple as using that combination of ships as bait if you wanted people to think it's an NPC convoy to pirate.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward so far as, if people are wanting to PvP, they're going to want to have challenging concepts or content. It's going to be there.
So
there will be a market.
So where do you guys stand on the issue? Are you more into the PvP or the PvE side? Let's put our cards down on the table.
Sure. I personally am. I'll go with more the PvE side, in how much you play the game, especially with the statement that we're going to have 10 NPCs and their ships flying around for every player out there. I think no matter how into PvP you are, you won't be able to escape the reality that the population of actual players is somewhat more limited than the population of NPCs out there. So when you fly into an instance, you're very likely to encounter mostly NPCs. And the thing about the slider and all that, I mean, I think it's a workable system. The issue I have, I've read a lot of these debate threads, and it's, I want PvP all the time, everywhere I go, and I don't care how anyone else wants to play the game. And my argument is that I kind of see that as an incentive to go out into deep space. If I'm going to go out there and look for the biggest rewards, I kind of like the risk that not only do we have aliens and NPCs that are going to attack me more, but the more aggressive players are out there too. But at the same time, the issue we were talking about a little while ago, where 30 of the goon, well, the goon's not fair. I mean, there's nothing actually saying they're going to be. It's 30 jackasses are going to be sitting out there and will just dive bomb new players to screw with them. And that I have a problem with, because that's just griefing. That's not PvP. That's just being an asshole because you can be an asshole. It's the greater internet fuckwad theory. Thank you, Penny Arcade.
Yes.
So that's where I kind of draw the line at the open PvP all the time, everywhere, for every reason. There needs to be a mechanism for people who want to consent to PvP to be able to play PvP. And if I don't want to play for whatever reason that day, then A, I'm not going to go into the high-risk space. But B, I just need people not to be engaged in that. So I think because of that, I'm going to fall down on the more PvE side of things. But that's me. I mean, I do enjoy a good PvP match. I will spin up that Super Hornet, I will gear it out, and I will go, out there to dogfight away.
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind here is, a lot of people, a lot of PvP players or people who identify themselves as PvP players have a sort of elitist attitude in the sense that they think PvEers are playing wrong. Right? And PvE players always say there's no such thing as playing wrong. Just because we don't want to fight a player doesn't mean, we don't want to have fun. We just want to have fun against a controlled opponent. And, whose definition of fun is correct, Gray? I mean, really?
Well, let me put my cards down on the table here. I am a PvP player. And I am a PvP player who is going to be focused on exploration and trade. I don't own a dogfighting ship in any traditional sense, and it's not something that I plan to do very heavily. I play support, I play trade, and I really enjoy it. Capital ships sound like a blast to me. But the fact is, I will have my PvP slider all the way up. And the reason for that is I'm looking for the full experience of whatever is available in that universe. I figure, as it's been noted, there are going to be way more NPCs than players. Yeah. And in fact, everyone who has their PvP slider all the way up isn't necessarily going to be out there saying, I'm going to shoot anything I see.
Yeah.
I'm certainly an example of that. I'm not going to just start firing at everything. But if somebody, quote-unquote, owns a small portion of space, has their little star base there, asteroid base, whatever it is, and is launching sorties from there to neighboring systems or throughout the same star system, I want to know that.
Yeah.
I want to be part of that little bit of the universe. And I figure that with the amount of NPC content there is, with the amount of generated content that I'm going to end up running into, whether my slider is up all the way or not, I should get a really good dose of what CIG has planned for the PvE, but still get that MMO feel. Okay. And still get all of those players that are doing either good or bad things or trying to control space or not, knocking at my door on my Starfarer.
So your Starfarer with the 2 guns and the 1 guy on board, hoping like hell no one notices it.
It's a good thing you're so small. Oh, well then.
My goal would largely be to fly with groups. And in the event that I need to do safe content, safe trading to make a little bit of money or, try to upgrade a ship or play the market or something like that. Sure, I'll do that in safe space, but I'll be doing it in safe space.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I think convoys actually might be a real thing. Now that I think about it, I mean, the convoy. I mean, if you have a bunch of merchants that have things like Starfarers or freelancers or constellations set up for cargo, and then you have them band all together and they pay one military contractor to escort them. A reliable one, not one that sells them out to the pirates. Hey, we know the convoy route.
And a big shout out to Bossman over on the forums, who actually has the organization called the Convoy. I'm really interested to see what he's going to do with that, and if he's interested in setting some things up early, I'd love to talk. But so it's going to be interesting to see these massive player organizations that are devoted to that sort of idea of trade and putting together large groups for the sake of going from point A to point B, rather than saying, let's take over an asteroid.
So, Calathulu, it seems like CIG is trying to sort of satisfy both sides with the PvP slider that's effective in safe space and not as effective in unsafe space. Do you think that is going to work? Is it going to satisfy both sides, or are there people that are still going to be upset?
The answer is no. Every game with the concept of PvP that's come out since Diablo 2 that I can recall, the first time where this concept of consensual PvP really became popular, from back in that was what, 94? Jeez. Anyway, I'm old, so I'm saying here. But more to the point, you're going to have people who want to PvP. Unlike Gray, they're going to want to go out there and they're going to want to just gank everything that moves. That's fun. All right. Then you're going to have the people that they actually are going to PvP and have fun. They want the challenge. They want all that. And then you're going to have the people that, that they're flying along in safe space, and then just that one time the slider didn't work, and they got hit with the guy who was absolutely geared to take them out. And in that rock, paper, scissors model, flying solo, which most people will be doing. I mean, a lot of us want to be in groups. All of us here in this podcast clearly grouped up. But a lot of people also don't play in groups frequently. I mean, if I'm coming on when I finally get free time at about 2 in the morning until about 3 in the morning Pacific time, it's what's going to happen is no one's going to be on. I'll be flying solo. Even though I do have a large group I could ask to play if I were on at a reasonable hour. So when I get just nailed by somebody, I will accept it. But a lot of people are going to go and complain about it, and it's going to be a very vocal group. And a lot of the PvPers are going to say, you're limiting my fun. I wanted to be able to fly into the secure space, duel it out with the various NPC ships there that are protecting trade, and really just rip open these merchantmen. And I can't do that. You're killing my fun because of the slider. I have to go and hunt these piddly-ass NPC merchantmen, with the Aurora and a cargo box, and I don't care for it. So a lot of people will be very happy with the solution. That's the silent majority. But the vocal minorities on both sides are going to make it an argument because, well, that's how the dysfunctional communities that surround these games work.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be troubling, but I think that they're going to straddle the line pretty well with the concept of this PvP slider. And the thing is, I think there are a few people on the extreme side of the PvE side. They're probably going to be able to really have a lot of fun with the Squadron 42 item, because that's a traditional single-player game that's designed for you to beat it, right? It's designed for you to eventually succeed. Whereas
the linear storyline.
Yeah, but the thing is, with an open world, even if you're not going up against PvP, essentially you're going to come up with situations that are PvE situations, but they're similar or exactly the same as a situation that would happen PvP. So if you're flying alone and you're freelancer doing a cargo run, even if with PvE slider, all the way over to PvE side, and you're just driving along, the Galaxy server doesn't dictate, that slider has nothing to do with how many encounters you have, and it has everything to do with the type. So just because you put it on PvE doesn't mean it's going to be easy, doesn't mean it's going to be a cake run. And I think some people are going to be a little shocked when they start having these PvE encounters where they're outnumbered 3-1, because that's a dangerous part of space you're going through, and it's very likely that players would gang up you in that same way in that same part of space.
Hey, when I was in
human
Eve,
hornets or
one,
yeah.
When I was in Eve and I was part of a pirate group there, I mean, that's exactly what we did. We just hang off that jump gate, wait for someone to jump in, try and lock them down so they couldn't jump away and blow them up. And that's exactly how players should behave. It's an ambush. Now, that said, with the slider, it's a good compromise. I really wish, though, because you can tailor the kind of encounter you're going to have, you could tailor it to the kind of game you want to play. Hey, I'd like more... If I'm going to have an encounter, PvE versus PvP, can it be a exploration encounter? Can it be a combat encounter? Can it be no guarantee you get that, but you can kind of state your preference and then let the game kind of figure it out. So rather than just one slider, I'm saying you could actually say, hey, in this MMO, I want to tailor my experience.
Yeah, and I always said that MMOs should be able to set up a difficulty slider to some degree. Yeah. And the more difficult you set it, the better the rewards you get. I mean, I said that for the longest time about Guild Wars 2. It would have made the leveling process a lot more fun if you could basically say, I want to be treated, I want to be scaled down in these areas so that it's actually difficult to level here, but I want the reward so that I level faster but it's more
Overall.
difficult. I have to be better. I have to dodge more correctly. I have to make sure I'm not, pulling too many mobs at the same time.
Yeah.
And they had the scaling feature in Guild Wars 2. They could have done that. Likewise,
They could
they
have,
have
yeah.
a scaling feature to some degree. They have control over how impressive those PvE mobs are. So it would be kind of nice if you could have a second slider that sort of affected your difficulty, where it would also say, oh, okay, so you wanted to do more difficult? Well, here it is. But then you open up the situation of, oh, well, you're carrying expensive cargo. You just put it on easy and you get tons of money. So that doesn't necessarily work. Now that I think about it, I'm thinking out loud.
With these endpoints, being the place where you're making your money, carrying from Terra to New Pittsburgh with, a load of unrefined ore or something like that. Yeah, the money-making spot is actually not like the high combat area. But that's a separate issue. I mean, they could do a difficulty thing. They could make all your bounties much harder, things like that. I would see no problem with that. It'd be a lot of fun.
All right, so Gray, there was a post on the forums basically decrying the fact that the game is going to be matching people up according to their skill. And recently there was a correction, and I think not too many people know this, is that Chris Roberts or Ben, I can't remember, Ben Lisnick might have sent it, is that it's not about, was this on, I think it was on Wingman's Hangar. He was talking about how it wasn't designed to be a perfect like matchmaking system. Like it's not about League, it's not trying to match up your elo. It's going to roughly measure your experience based on play time so that experienced players don't wind up against inexperienced players. But does that take kind of some of the magic out of it if you never really matched up with somebody much better than you? What do you think, Gray?
To some degree it would if we were talking about a system where every zone had equal probability of saying, okay, level 1 player will only hit level 1 player for whatever level 1 means. And level, 5,001 experience will only be against 5,001 or higher. The problem is if a low experienced player tries to go into the far out reaches, they've already been pretty clear. You're going to get matched up against whoever's there looking to kill you. Dangerous places will be dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And for that matter, even if you weren't matched against players who were willing to just wipe the floor with you, those zones are going to be full of NPCs so painful that you would never get out alive. I think that for some of the very small areas where you start, places where you might first have player contact that could be unfriendly just outside of lawful space, yeah, this could take a little bit of the edge off of it, potentially. But what they get in return for that is better longevity for the game.
Yeah.
These players that are coming through with their first Aurora after finishing Squadron 42 in, let's say, June of 2016, don't necessarily want to run into a tight formation of 4 Idris, 2 Starfarers, and 26 Hornets that are flying on a patrol route through this area because they, quote-unquote, control this area of semi-lawful space and are trying to prevent a specific resource from getting through for their economic scheme or whatever else it is. I think that as the player gets more experienced, they should be much more likely to run into the giant hit squads of organized groups that have been playing for 2 years because it makes sense. You don't just give them a free pass. It'll just be a very careful tuning game by CIG, I think, to make sure that you're not improperly taking new players out of content that is essential to the running of the game. And I think it'll be much clearer to them a couple months after launch what sorts of content people are craving, what's getting people to go back to zones, and what's telling people, okay, this area is just off limits, let's never go there again, let's steer our transports around it. What player behaviors need to be moderated by saying new players just aren't going to run into you. You're not going to be able to kill people because you have 16 Idris that just stack into the system.
Yeah, so we've got Lemavox in the Twitch chat asking, is it confirmed there will be servers for different zones in the globe? And my understanding is that there will be different servers that will be able to create battle instances such that, and that's one of the other things. I think I might not have mentioned that actually on the the Alpha Boot Camp. But when you're moving your ship into a location, be it a jump point or a derelict ship or an asteroid or a moon or a planet, when you're going into a new area and you are then, the system's trying to determine what instance are you going to be in, it will try to match you in an instance with other people in your area geographically on the globe. So if Terra has, 30 different instances representing an orbit around Terra, and 3 of them are in Europe and 7 of them are in the US or whatever, then you're going to be put in the Europe one if you're in Europe. And so if any fight breaks out, your ping to that instance will be similar to all the other people that are there. But that does raise some questions, and that's where I wanted to spend the rest of the time talking about, is how exactly is this instance system going to work? Because we've been, Gray knows, we have this Skype chat for Tales of Citizens, and we have just been going over this over and over again. We've been coming up with different questions like why, how are they going to handle this situation? How are they going to handle this situation? And there's just doesn't seem to be an easy answer to any of these things. So let's start there. Gray, what happens when 2 forces meet in the middle of space or around a moon or something, or a space station, and they can't all fit in the same instance? How is CIG going to handle that?
It was clear that first come, first serve was definitely on the agenda. So if you're saying that you have, 200 people and only 100 could fit in this instance between all of the various ships that they have and the sizes and all that. So if that number of people can fit in the instance, I'm going to bet that the first number of them that get in there will probably end up with that, assuming that it's organized groups. When we're talking about squads fighting each other, these are people that are going to be friends with each other in the same organization, that kind of thing, and that puts you on that priority list to already put into the same instance as your boss. It doesn't matter if you're a European and you're in a US organization. At that point, you're both going to get stuck into the same instance, and I would bet that that instance will be whoever created it being a loose term, by stepping into it first. So the US player steps into the instance in their Idris, and all of a sudden you've got another Idris from the US that comes in from the other side. All of a sudden you've got a fleet battle. And from that point on, all their buddies are just going to stack in until the instance fills, and then you've got instance number 2, and then it goes from there.
So then, of course, brings up the question: what if your command ship winds up late and it winds up in its own instance with 6 Hornets, and it's like, well, it was supposed to be hiding in the back, protected by our other ships, but now our command ship and our refueling ship are by themselves. Well,
sounds like you shouldn't have gone in late.
I guess. I'm assuming you're going to be able to move as a fleet, right? You're probably going to be able to do that. I mean, Eve had that functionality.
Eve did, but I have a concept here that could be kind of cool. So we already know that they're command and control ships. They're command and control modules. So what if part of that whole command and control ship thing is a computer upgrade, and that computer upgrade literally lets the command and control slave the other jump drives to its system, its setup, and in doing so, you then dictate, jump when safe, or jump on my mark. It waits for the first instance you can all fit in, and then just drops you in. I mean, that's a good use for a command control ship. It's a good use for their upgrade system, and it would kind of balance out the question of, can you fit everybody? I mean, granted, if it fits 50 people, you got 100, but what are the odds that you're going to have a group of 100 people if the instance max is 50 in the first place?
Yeah, that's another question. I've kind of come to the conclusion that you're going to be able... I think the most elegant way that they're going to do this is essentially, if 2 large forces, let's say you're flying in a group with, 200 people, and you're going to meet up with a group of 200, and let's say, for the sake of argument, that the number of people that can fit in an instance is 75 per side, okay, just for the sake of argument. How is it going to divvy that up? Well, I think you're going to have some system similar to a party system in another MMO, right? Or a fleet system in Eve, where you're going to try to create, fleets of 75, like a raid setup in an MMO of like 40 people. You'd create fleets of 75 specifically for when you move into that situation. You'd always get your own instance if you're moving around in a fleet of 75, at least on your side. And then anybody that's listed as hostile towards you would come in and take up the other 75 slots. And that way you could conform and force, okay, this fleet has our command and control, it has our support, it has our carriers, and it also has the fighters and the interceptors that we need, and it's a balanced fleet. And you wouldn't have that fleet getting split up across multiple instances. But then the question becomes, okay, so now you've got 3 or 4 instances where all these battles are taking place. Well, they're all theoretically happening in the same area of space. They're just near each other, but not directly on top of each other. What happens when side A wins instance 1, side B wins instance 2 and 3? Does it merge those instances on the fly?
God, I hope so.
Well, I would imagine that the instances may not merge on the fly, but there may be, again, because they talked about how you have the spheres of intercept, or spheres of I'm trying to remember what the word is here. Spheres of encounters, basically. So as you move away from that, it's very possible you would encounter the survivors from these other instances and merge back into a new one in the same area as you're on your way to your destination. I don't imagine you're all sitting still in space, though I suppose that must be possible. But instead, you're flying from one spot to another, and you just happen to cross paths. And when you cross those paths, that's when the encounter happens. As you move away, you cross paths with survivors of the second group, the second instance. And if you are opposed to each other, then the combat happens again.
They have mentioned that the way that you'll get pulled out of autopilot is essentially due to the fact that your autopilot can only go in a straight line when you warp from one side of a system to another. And if there's anything in your way, your autopilot drops you out of warp because it can't maneuver fast enough. So it just says, hey, you have to go through this area on manual. Whether this area is a moon or an asteroid belt or another ship, it's like, yeah, our forward-looking radars dropped you out. You know, good luck with that. I hope it's not pirates. So
in that case, don't have too stealthy a ship, or you can't drop out of warp to have your encounter.
Nobody will drop out of warp because nobody detects you. Wow, that's brilliant. Royal DeFuck wants to know what is up with this game. What is going on here? I don't know how he found the page. He's like, what is Tales of Citizens? Is this a game? It's going to be out in early 2015 or so. Yes, early 2015, and it's $40 right now, probably 50 or 60 when it goes retail is how much it costs. But yes, we're talking about a game that comes out in 1 year because they're doing a module-based slow release of the various pieces of the game. Very soon we're going to get the dogfighting module. We'll be able to play with that. And after that, we'll have a sort of planet-side beta. So we'll be able to play with the game a good deal in 2014. And then the full game will be released in 2015. And there's a lot more to go when it comes to that.
This is not one of those soft release betas. This isn't the developer that's basically saying, okay, we're going to release the game and then let you test it and then just sort of drift along. This seems to be legitimate beta or alpha and beta testing.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a situation where they have you test things, they make sure it works, and then they say, thank you for your time. We will be releasing the full game and resetting everything at such and such a date. That way nobody gets a head start by being part of beta or alpha outside of your whole skill thing.
Lumavox is like, no, stop justifying it. We're all just insane talking about a game that's going to be out in 2015. You don't sugarcoat it. All right, so
we're a little nuts.
We're a little nuts. So there's all kinds of questions that come with this instancing thing, and to me, the other thing that's really exciting is because they're building it around this instancing concept, that's how they're going to allow us to have our own servers where we can play, okay, we're going to set up, 3 Hornets against, 4 Auroras and see what happens. Or we're going to, have a match and have this fleet bring 12 and this fleet bring 12, however they want to set it up, and have a death match, tournament. Yeah. That is so exciting to me. And we should be able to do that sometime, mid 2014 when the dogfighting module is more, robust and more polished, and we've got access to more of the ships and stuff. I'm guessing we're probably going to have one or two to start
answer
with.
The question question: how many Auroras do you have to ram it into an Idris?
Yes, we're gonna lab that. There's gonna be a science team. It's gonna be great. So yeah.
MR means missile.
We get the
missile resistance.
The DPS. You get the DPS rating for the SB Aurora.
Yes.
The suicide bombing Aurora.
All right, so what other questions do we have about this whole instancing thing? Let's take a quick look at the actual article itself, which does fairly well go over the details, but it doesn't answer a lot of questions. I mean, the other thing they bring up here, which sounds really exciting, is that you can have your friends and enemies drop into your single player experience, a la Dark Souls. Chris Roberts mentions in this article how he was very impressed with the way Dark Souls handled a multiplayer single-player experience. And that just sounds cool. I mean, you could just be flying in a single-player, mode when all of a sudden the ace that you have to go up that's like the boss encounter of this level is actually another player that just dropped in, like a special infected in Left 4 Dead 2. That is so cool!
Surprise!
Exactly. Am I the only one?
I think it's awesome. I had not heard of that theory heretofore. They've certainly not mentioned it recently.
Yeah, no, it's been in this article that's a year old. You're behind the times.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I read that a year ago. I've heard about the slider over and over again, but never about a Dark Souls style single player. See, that's really cool. I would actually really enjoy that.
Yeah, he says
maybe even more than the private universe necessarily, but that's pretty awesome.
Let me find the exact quote here. My original version for Freelancer.
That's right, I need your
Where
source.
Did he talk about the Dark Souls? Now I can't find it.
See, look at you. You're spreading rumors, man.
Multiplayer and instancing. Okay, well, I guess I'm spreading rumors. I know he talked. I read it. Somebody in the chat's going to help me out. Somebody's going to help me out. So, I mean, that does sound like a cool experience. Now, here comes another question for you guys. So this is something I was thinking about. So the system has reserved slots in every single instance, right? So that your friends can wind up joining you.
Hopefully.
What happens if your friends have their own friends? So let's say you've got a friend A who's hanging out on Terra, and a friend B who is not friends with friend A, but he's also hanging out on Terra, but they have their own friends, and so they're placed in separate instances. When your guy joins, are you going to join A's instance or B's instance? And if so, how are you going to, coordinate that? You're trying to get them into a fleet. I assume if ahead of time you make a fleet, it'll put you all in the same instance. I wonder if it'll do it dynamically.
There has to be some sort of, squad or fleet system for that.
Well, they did mention something about that. They did mention something about that called the person of interest, where you could click on somebody and then list them as someone you're interested in, and it made it more likely you would be in the same instance. That's not quite a squad or a fleet. I have to imagine there's also wingman designator, I am the designator of, or I'm the wingman of this guy, and this other guy is also his wingman. So we're guaranteed the jump, and it won't do anything with the jump until we can get an instance together. But I think for actually hunting somebody, like following a merchant ship as a pirate, that person of interest is the way you do it. Like they jump away, you make that person of interest, you kind of guess where they're heading, or you heard them talk about it in chat, and then you follow them until you can create the encounter by overtaking them.
Oh, maybe it was Demon Souls and not Dark Souls. I'm still looking. I'm going to find it.
I don't feel ignored, but I do feel ignored. No, I'm kidding.
Aha! I was really impressed with how Demon Souls merged the single-player experience with the multiplayer side. Okay. And then he goes on to talk about things. It is in that article.
And then stuff.
The same instance system underpins the single-player Squadron 42. If you're playing offline, your computer will be acting as the server and client, and no opportunities for friends to join, and everyone will be an NPC. But if you play Squadron 42 through the Galaxy server, even though your missions and space areas are predetermined, because the missions are pre-made, it will allow your friends to drop in and out to take over the NPC wingman. And if you have if you want an extra skilled ranking, you can allow other players to drop in and take over enemy ace characters. carebares. The system is
That's
pretty
right.
similar to the Demon Soul setup, where people could drop in as a blue phantom, or they could drop in as a black phantom, and somebody else would try to kill you. So I found
If
it.
you have buddies who are bad at flying, get ready to lock them out.
Yeah. Sorry, I accidentally opened it in the offline mode, but I'm in the middle of the mission now, so. You can't
I
go.
really hate to tell you this, but my connection is getting really spotty. I'm just going to have to make sure you can't get into my game.
But
I
What?
don't know how it was you got bumped from my friends list. I don't see how that could have happened.
It's too bad. It turns out that Slippy, that's the wingman I named, is way better than you.
Do a barrel roll.
Oh, okay. So, any final comments here about this instancing system? It just sounds like they're going to have to come up with some genius ideas to solve all of these problems, because every time we talk about it, we've come up with new ideas of how it could break, really.
Well, I think ultimately a lot of where this is going to end up is the simplest possible solution. You know, I write software. I understand. You know, the guys I work with, they all go for the simplest possible solution, even when that becomes extremely complex. So things like the player experience, that may just be hours you spent in a ship, or the hours the /age command gives for your character. It may not be things like your dogfighting stats with the neutron cannon versus his with the Gatling gun, and some of the other ideas I have not seen bandied about in the Tale of Citizen chat, but I have seen kind of tossed out there as, wouldn't this be cool, on the forum. So if you think about the easiest way to make it all kind of work, other than just throwing people at each other, that's probably about where it'll end up.
Now, here's another one that comes to mind. So, they've mentioned how your ship is actually going to move through space, right?
True.
You can't just say, I'm on, Terra, and I want to go to this jump point. It's not going to take. There's no direct flights. You have to catch
There's
a connecting
no jump
flight.
gate kind of thing. Yeah.
You can only go a certain distance, I guess, within a single system with autopilot, right? You can't just go straight from one to the other, which means you'll have to go from Terra to an asteroid belt, to a moon around another gas giant, to a derelict ship area, then to the actual. So there'll be like points of space that will act as focuses for encounters. So I'm guessing if you're a pirate and you want to intercept traders and attack them, you would probably hang out in one of these areas. But could you also hang out in between to try and knock them out of autopilot? And if there's nobody waiting there for you, is it going to be like, yep, you've reached the asteroid field, now you're going to have to pilot for 2 minutes across to the other side to get out of the asteroid field's little mini gravity well thingy, whatever you want to call it, and then you can jump, warp out again? Because I could see situations where if they make you drop out every time, even when there's no players, that could be really frustrating. But at the same time, if every time you drop out, there's a player around, that defeats the purpose of stealth ships, right?
Well, yes and no. Don't forget, there are plenty of NPCs. So you drop out, and okay, there's a merchant convoy over there, and over here I've got the ZN Scout who's doing mineral survey on the asteroids, and you don't see that stealth Aurora LN behind you that's trying to get the engine shut. So I'm saying
it's also not to say where in the system they are. You could be knocked out of transport routinely by people who are just leaving that area. So as you're coming in and you're decelerating, they're accelerating out. It's very possible that just due to directions and that kind of thing, you could end up dropping into that asteroid belt thinking, oh god, there's going to be 500 pirates. And really there's one Aurora LN who was just leaving the system, who was a little bit slower than you, and your system went, oh, gotta stop. And you could spend the next 45 minutes hunting around that system and finding asteroids.
But that's your chance for a mineral survey.
Yes. Lord Last Day on the YouTube says, my biggest worry is the requirements will be too high. The Crisis engine is notorious for hogging resources, and an MMO wants as many players as possible. While that's true, consider that the Crisis 3 engine that they're working on is technology that's about 2 years old, and it's coming out in about a year. So it shouldn't be impossible to use it, even if they heavily modify it to make it even more pretty, which they're doing to some extent. Yeah. The game is currently running in real time on cards that are available today, which means those cards will be $100 cheaper a year from now, at the least.
True. But it's also rendering 1 or 2 ships at a time on cards available today.
True.
Hopefully at the 3-year mark from the technology point, it will be mid-range computers that will run it okay.
The other thing that's worth noting is there's a lot of talk about the Crisis Engine hogging a lot of resources and a lot of these things taking up a lot of your system. Yeah, it's going to be system intensive. We know that much. But we're not talking about situations where you're rendering 750 dirt particles flying up when your grenade explodes and throws somebody's arm this direction and a box this direction, and you have to render all the smoke and everything else. You're dealing with a situation where it's rendered ships and then a pretty background and a few rendered objects, not a whole rendered. You have to be running on a plane, and you have to have these many supposedly solid objects that are destructible with X amount of force and explode into exactly these designs and damage these people behind them and so on and so forth. It's space.
Yeah.
And having one asteroid is much different than having a huge city with a bunch of people shooting at each other, through windows and doors and destructible walls and everything else. Really what you're looking at is more modeling how is the shield moving, what's the angle of impact on the armor. And if you've seen, for example, World of Tanks and the way that they very primitively model armor penetration and penetration after impact with armor spacing, and then the penetration into the cabin and whether that hits a module and that kind of thing. World of Tanks, you can run on a crappy laptop. That sort of calculation is very, very doable without the sort of system hogging that Crisis is even known for. The big concern is always going to be about, if there's 100 ships, do you have the ability to show 100 ships? But as it stands, 100 people in World of Warcraft sucks to render. Unless you have a good system, you're going to have problems cranking the entire thing up all the time.
I mean, look at the problems Guild Wars 2 had with culling all the time. I mean, I think it's more or less, although the problem there was all the customized looking armor and things.
Yeah.
If instead you have a situation where the game will simply turn off the, what do you call it, the sort of cosmetic extras, so that every Hornet kind of looks the same except for its targeting designation. They'll have a friend or foe indicator, of course, right?
Well, they are much more modular than the Guild Wars 2 system, for that matter.
So that might be a sort of advantage, and that's the same problem that WoW has. Is everybody can have different, hugely different kinds of armor, but the Hornets can all probably be looking pretty much the same, except maybe the ones that have the slightly different body, like the Super Hornet or the military variant. But then you're only talking about 30 different maybe ship types or combinations or so,
you're
versus
not
hundreds.
Have 100 unique models. You're
Yeah.
gonna have 100 of some relatively similar models with modular changes, like this gun is a slightly different shape or a slightly different size, rather than saying you're going to have a character which has this many height limitations and this many gear modification possibilities and this many extra particle effects, which, by the way, Guild Wars 2, the particle effects were insane on some of those armors,
especially
when you were in World v. World.
Oh yeah, or all the mage spells at launch where you couldn't see half of what's going on. And I recall that.
All right, so let's wrap this up. We're at 8:04. Any final comments here about this whole instancing PvP, PvE thing? I'm sure we'll be coming back around to it when we get more information about everything that's going on. But Gray, any final comments on this?
I just look forward to seeing what they do. As you aptly note, a whole lot of questions that haven't been answered, and the last major article about the entire subject was last year.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens.
Calathulu, any final comments? I mean, are you worried? There's one more question I want to ask. Are you worried about how seamlessly they'll be able to make this system work? I mean, I have these sort of like nightmares of these instances being so obvious when you enter or leave one, and you're trying to see somebody, but somebody else says, I see this and I don't see that, and there could be all kinds of problems with it. Did
you play Freelancer at all when or private mostly Freelancer?
No, I didn't play those. I played the Wing Commanders, but I never played the Freelancer.
That's good, because Wing Commander didn't have this kind of system at all. Freelancer did, and okay, there are some differences there. In Freelancer, you traverse a system by going to a jump gate, shooting down the jump gate, and then all of a sudden, you would get kicked out. It'd be no warning for it. You would just fall out, and all the pirate ships are zooming around and coming to get you. So there was no encounter type in that, but pirate ships. But it gives you kind of an idea. It's the viewport you have stays the same. It's just that instead of seeing hyperspace flying by, you're dumped out, you're scrambling to get things set up, and you're trying to dodge the first incoming shots. So, is it obvious? Yes. Is it seamless? Yes. And I suspect, yeah, exactly. I suspect, for example, if you go through your autopilot, you go through your faster than light travel, whatever it is, you get to the end and you fall out again. It's obvious that you got your destination. It's obvious that there are ships flying around and you can see them right in front of you. You don't necessarily know what their intentions are. I mean, in Freelancer, I came out a couple of times, and someone would be off here waiting for me to come in and start shooting immediately, or I'd come in and I could see a ship. I could actually go up, fly up to it, and initiate a dialogue of some kind. So I was at the destination. I had finished my journey, but there was still an encounter to be had. So the answer to your question really is, if they do it just like Freelancer, it will be too obvious for the game that we've had described to us. If they take the basic concept and expand on that, so you are in your viewport, you've seen things fly by, and you get a little perimeter warning or whatever it's going to be, or a sensor blip that doesn't stop you, you better react to it to drop out and find that alien artifact floating in space that no one has noticed prior to you flying by. If they kind of make it some kind of interactive part, and also something just dumps you out of autopilot from time to time, but keep your viewpoint the same, you're still looking out the window, you're still at your controls, even if they're locked out for autopilot, it will do well to make you still feel involved during autopilot versus during the encounter, and you won't always know what the encounter is or what's going on or what it's going to be. The only concern I have is this concept of stealth ambushes, because if you fly in, you dump out, you don't see anything, well, that's not fair, actually. Let's go with the alien artifact thing. You got a ping, you couldn't tell where it was at. So you dump out, you're like, well, there could be an awesome thing around here. And that's when the things, that were off your radar signature start opening up on you. And it's not so awesome anymore.
Fair enough. All right,
Surprise.
so surprise. There's going to be plenty of those, I'm sure. All right, so we're gonna call it a night here. Episode number 3 is a wrap. Next week, we are going to be talking about the physics of Star Citizen, and we are going to have our very own astrophysicist, the gorilla astronomer from down under, joining us next week. It's going to be fantastic. He has been helping us out and talking a lot about, orbital dynamics and black holes, and he's been raging about the black hole system, by the way. He'll have something to say about that next week.
So that's going to be on the 29th?
Yes, sorry, 2 weeks from now, the 29th is when we'll be recording that episode. So that'll be our physics episode, where we talk about not only the physics of dogfighting and how it's being used in Star Citizen and what we'd like to see, but also the physics of, macro games. Does it matter if like Jupiter never actually orbits the sun? Will we care? Will we notice? We'll talk all about that, I'm sure.
Notice.
We'll see you guys that next time. We'll be doing a Alpha Boot Camp about physics. That'll come out next week. But for now, I'm Bridger, signing off. And joining me this week, Calathulu and Gray. Thanks, guys.
You have a nice week.
Man, I love that fucking music. Right?
Kind of addictive, isn't
That
it?
hanger module is amazing. I love it. And it ends so perfectly with this sad trumpet dwindling off into the distance. It's great. All right, I know.
But
I don't know. Well, it's not sad trombone, like womp womp. All right, so Calathulu, I know you've got to go.
I have to go pack so I can catch my flight, and then tomorrow about 6 a.m. Eastern, I will be going to work. So I love red eyes because they don't pay me to fly regardless. This way, at least, I'm not losing much personal time.
Yes, exactly. So what we're going to do now is Team Legacy has been organizing a game of At War. And if you guys haven't seen this At War game, think of it like Axis and Allies or Risk, a turn-based game on a big map. And it's kind of on steroids. There's a lot of different options. Not only that, there's a lot of options as far as what you can play on. Like, people have made like Battle of Middle-earth maps. They've made maps of the ancient world and a bunch of other things. I can show you kind of what this looks like here.
Well, I will leave you guys to it. Enjoy your evening.
Have a good one.
See you.
So it's basically, you can see that there's like cities, and the cities that you capture give you resources and recruits that you can then use to build up and move in and attack here. So it looks like we've got Greece, the Roman Empire, and the barbarians versus like the Carthaginian Empire down here in the south. So that's pretty cool looking. So we're going to be playing some variant of this. They've also got a modern variant. There's, like I said, the Battle of Middle-earth variants. So I'm going to take a small break, and I'm going to get with the guys, the TL guys on the Team Legacy TeamSpeak. You can join us, by the way, teamlegacy.net. The TeamSpeak is in the right-hand side. So we're going to get some people together, and I'm going to be streaming this in a few minutes. So if you guys want to stay, go ahead and stick around and watch. We're going to have some fun, probably make some teams, talk our strategy, and hope the other team doesn't stream snipe us. All right, have a good one, everybody.